And we want to welcome you back to Across America. Glad to have you here on a Saturday afternoon as we meet here from every Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. right here on KGAB or KGAB.com. And we hope you're enjoying your Saturday today. On the phone, we have somebody who, during the early 1970s, of course, he was involved with acting before that, but January 15th, 1972, he helped to launch what was known as Emergency. And I'm talking about one of the lead stars of that, the man who played Johnny Gage, Mr. Randy Mantooth. Glad to have you on Across America, Randy.
No, thank you, Gary. I appreciate it.
And so you've been a busy man since the early 70s, and I was but a lad back then, and so I caught some of the live, but probably caught a lot of the reruns, and I know a lot of our friends back on the block. You and Kevin Ty were a couple of our heroes, and of course we would play Emergency and Chips on our bicycles and things like that when we were kids. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved with the series Emergency.
Well, you mentioned that I was an actor before that. Not by much I wasn't. I had just graduated from the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York and was signed to a contract at Universal Studios from New York. They flew me out there. Of course, I'm from California. I was born in California.
Right.
So they just flew me back home. And I was in a contract for about 6 months before. I did a television series called The Bold Ones, I think it was, and it was one of the very first things I ever did. And I had a scene with Hal Holbrook, and the scene was a great one. I played a young lieutenant who gave the order to fire at Kent State, and and how the guilt that he was going through. And Bob Senator who was the executive producer of Emergency, which didn't exist at that time, they were just developing the show. He saw that piece of film, and he looked up and he said, "That's my Johnny Gage." And then my bosses there at Universal brought me in one day, and I was only 20 years old. They brought me in, and they sat me down, and they said, "Okay, you're going to be playing Los Angeles County firefighter paramedic Johnny Gage for this new show called Emergency." And the first thing I said was, "What's a paramedic?"
Right.
Because that word, didn't even really exist at that time. And then I said, "No, I don't think I want to do it." And they were shocked, and they said, "You have to understand, I was under contract, so there was nothing I could do about it." And they said, just for curiosity's sake, why don't you want to do it? And I said, "Well, this is a Jack Webb show, right?" And they said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, they'll make me want to cut my hair. I'll have to cut my hair, right?" And they said, "Yeah, probably." And I said, "Well, I don't really want to cut my hair." And they said, "Shut up and sit down." So luckily they didn't pay any attention to what I was saying.
Absolutely, yeah, and you did have some longer hair in the earlier series. It was shorter. But during that time when Emergency first came out, and you did say that paramedics weren't really known at the time, but we do know that there were some pilot programs across the United States with paramedics joining the fire departments. Was Emergency that gave them the idea of that, or were there already some pilot programs in place at the time of the programming?
Yeah, no, there were four places in Miami in the late 60s, 68, 69, and maybe 70. There were four totally independent. They didn't even know about one another. There were four doctors here in America. Dr. Nagel from Miami. He was developing this program of using firefighters in the field to act as the eyes and ears and hands of the doctors out in the field. Then up in Seattle, Washington, Dr. Leonard Cobb was doing the same thing. And in Los Angeles, Dr. Michael Criley, who we renamed Dr. Brackett, and he was working out of Harbor General Hospital, which we renamed Rampart. And a Dr. Walter Graff, they started to develop this idea of using these specially trained personnel out in the field, and these specially trained personnel all happen to be firefighters. So, but in each case, in Miami, Seattle, and also in Columbus, Ohio. I don't want to forget them. They were very important too. But nowhere else, and nobody really knew the word paramedic. And basically, they couldn't. Everybody was so anti-paramedic at that time. Doctors hated the idea because they just felt that nobody could do what they do in the field. Nurses, of course, hated it because they thought they were being replaced. And politicians hated it because they didn't know how to fund it. They didn't want to raise taxes. They didn't want to. They just felt it was going to be too expensive. They didn't know how to pay for it. And so basically this whole idea of paramedics was dead in the water. It really wasn't going to go anywhere because it was just too... and there were some old-time firefighters who didn't really like the idea of the paramedic service coming into the fire department because they would say, we put out fires. We don't deliver babies. That was their mantra at the time. Well, then once Jack or Bob Senator went down and started to see these firefighters coming in and speaking to the doctors and nurses and the interns in medical speak, he kept saying, who are these guys? What are they doing? Because this is unheard of to have firefighters, talking to doctors in medical speak. And finally, when he was told what they were, he did a crash course on what a paramedic was, and he went into Jack Webb and says, I found it. I found the show. And he explained what it was. And even Jack resisted it at first.
Wow.
Because he said, nobody wants to see a bunch of firemen run around sticking needles into people. Well, once Jack saw it, he apologized quickly and said, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. He said, this is a brilliant idea. Well, once the show was put out on the air and the American public saw it, and they all said, wait a minute, is this real? Does this really exist? Can this really happen? And once they realized, yeah, indeed it was, well, it just took the nation by storm.
We're talking with Randy Mantooth. He played firefighter Johnny Gage, paramedic Johnny Gage on the hit series Emergency. Now, it looked like your guys' crew there in the fire department was pretty tight. One of the comical things was the spat back and forth between you and Tim Donnelly, who played Chet Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
How was the relationship in real life? You guys were probably buddies, or?
Oh, well, it was pretty much the same relationship in real life as you saw on TV. Bob Senator would come down on the set, and he would watch us all messing around. And basically, it was nothing new because in a fire station, there's always that sort of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So Bob would just look at our relationships, and basically he would craft the scripts around who we were and what we were really doing. So basically, what you saw between Chet and myself, between Tim Donnelly and myself, and basically that's the way it was in real life.
That's neat. Now, the fire station, let's talk about that just a little bit. That was located in Carson. In Carson, California.
Right.
And how did we secure that for the series?
Bob wanted, Bob Senator, our executive producer, just wanted a station that wasn't out in the country. He didn't want to way down deep into the city. He just wanted a kind of a generic-looking fire station that kind of represented all of Los Angeles County, but he also needed to get big equipment down there. So he had a lot of things that he had to think about. How is he going to get his equipment? Where's he going to put the equipment? Because we got 65 people in the crew. Where are they going to be? So it had to be big enough, but yet not so big. And so he found Station 127's. And the L.A. County Fire said you can't use that number because then everybody will come down here and bug everybody. And so they said, well, okay, well, what number can we use? And they said, well, they gave him a whole list of stations that had been deactivated or shut down, and there were only maybe about 7, 8, 9, 10, I don't know, stations that didn't have this number, and the first number Bob saw was 51, and he said, well, what's wrong with that number there? And he said, yeah, that station doesn't exist anymore, so you can use that number. So that's how 51 came out.
Now, were a lot of these scenes shot in a backlot at Universal Studios somewhere, or was this?
This was yeah. A lot of it was shot there, but mostly it was shot all over Los Angeles. I mean, it was kind of funny. Everybody said, hey, you want a building destroyed? Just call emergency. They'll come and burn it down for you. And we did. We burnt most of L.A. during those 7 years.
That's great, little renovation. And one last question about emergency, Randy. Where's Squad 51 now? The actual.
It's at the L.A. County Fire Museum, along with the Ward LaFrance that we used for 5 of those 7 years, and then the crown, the crown that we used for the first year.
Okay, very good. We're talking with Randy Mantooth here on Across America Today, and when we come back, we will continue our discussion with Mr. Johnny Gage, a.k.a. Randy Mantooth, right here on Across America. Don't you dare go away. We'll be right back after this. Okay, here we go. And you're back on Across America here on a Saturday afternoon. Glad to have you with us. On the phone with us is the man who played Johnny Gage from the Emergency series back in the 70s, Mr. Randy Mantooth. Welcome back to the program, Randy.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it.
Now, one thing that for our listeners, if they are interested, and I know there's a lot of people that will be able to hear this interview, on July 9th, that's this July 9th of 2011, for the first time since the series ended in 1977, the Squad 51, the little paramedic vehicle that we used to see in the television program, and the 2 big engines that were in the program, the Ward LaFrance and the Crown, will be set side by side at Station 127 in Carson, California. Is that correct, Randy?
That is correct.
And you're going to be
there. It's an all-day event.
And you're going to be there as well?
I will be there. I'll be there for a couple hours. I promised them that I would sign some autographs and some pictures, but I will be there for a portion of that day, yes.
And what time does that kick off? Do you know?
I'm not really sure, but I believe it kicks off at 10 o'clock, and I believe it goes right on through till about 6 o'clock. It's a barbecue, and we're honoring Universal Studios for their cooperation in making the show. We're honoring Yosemite National Park because they're the ones who gave us back the Ward LaFrance. After the show ended, the squad was put back into service, and then and the Ward LaFrance was put into service and then got traded up to Universal Studios. Once owned all the concessions up at Yosemite, so the Ward LaFrance was shipped up there to help fight fires up there. Well, when we found out that these things were all being used, we were afraid they were going to get destroyed, and so the L.A. County Fire Department pulled them out of service before they got hurt, or damaged, and then they were given to the L.A. County Fire Museum.
Well, I don't think I can be there, but I got some buddies that are firefighters, so maybe I'll have them swing by there, and maybe I can get an autograph photo of you, or maybe we can talk about that later.
Yeah.